Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for braving the atmospheric river, I believe it's called, that has been inundating us. We're so glad that you are here tonight. Welcome to tonight's Portland Storytellers Guild. We are presenting Trish Anderson, John Wylder, and Brian Rohr, with their stories of Around the Hearth Fire. My name is Gretchen Peterson. I'm your MC for the evening. You know I'm the MC. I believe I'm the only one wearing a tie here, so point me out. There's the knot right there, which is a Windsor knot. I know all of you were wondering about that. Tonight we bring you our show, as we have been bringing the last couple of years, from Cafe Artichoke. Huge round of applause for our friends at Cafe Artichoke, who are celebrating their 50th anniversary. Who here remembers 1973? What a year that was. This is, as we know, the season of giving. And Artichoke depends on our generosity. So please look them up on their Patreon page, also at artichokemusic.org. Donate what you can to keep these wonderful shows going. For this evening's performance, we have Artichoke volunteers. We've got Steve taking tickets. Woohoo! We have Gary running sound and video. And at the bar is Christopher. Now, speaking of the bar, there are drinks and snacks. I want to give you a little rundown on some of these snacks. Are you ready? Yes. Okay. That was not a rhetorical question. Mixed nuts. Let's hear it for mixed nuts. Peanut butter pretzels. Yeah. Trail mix. Chocolate covered, I'm going to fake you out, almonds. And you know what's really cool about them? They're in glass. You can't take the glass with you, but it's cool. So buy some snacks while you are here. Buy some drinks, and please, please tip early and often, as we say. Now, we know this is the season of bells, carols, wonderful sounds. We will hear a lot of wonderful sounds tonight of your laughter, your oohs, your ahs. But please make sure those wonderful bells on your phones are silenced. Oh, even one of our tellers needs to reach and see. Please, please check for sure. Now, restrooms. There are 3 in this wonderful venue. We've got one right here by the stage. Please use it at intermission and afterwards. And then there are 2 restrooms. If you go back towards the exit, take a left. There's one up the stairs and then one on the same floor. And while you're there, look at the amazing musical instruments that are back there. They are a show in and of themselves. Now, when you entered, you had a chance to fill out a card to tell us how you heard about this show. After intermission, I will be pulling one of your names. The person whose name is on that card, you will get free tickets to our February show here at Artichoke. Now, everybody, take a great breath in, great breath out. And think about Around the Hearth Fire. What does that mean to you? For me, I can remember all 5 senses of the hearth in my family's home. There's a sight of those flames flickering, the sound, the snap of the pinon wood, that smell of those pinon smoke and the ashes, a taste of hot chocolate, and just that wonderful feeling of warmth inside and from that wonderful fire. Well, that's the theme for tonight. Around the hearth fire. Our three tellers, again, Trish Anderson, John Wylder, Brian Rohr, they will tell us stories around the hearth fire for them. So it is my great pleasure to welcome our first teller, Trish Anderson.
Hello. When I think about the hearth fire, that was the one sure way that my parents could get us kids, my brothers and me, together, was to light a fire, and instantly there would be children draped over all the furniture, all of us reading books. So my story tonight, it includes brothers, there's a fire, and it's a story. So we're good, right? This story is about the Ash Lad. You may not know him. He's a character from the Norse mythology cycle. And he's a bit of a Nordic Cinderella. He lived with a couple of brawny older brothers who loved nothing better than to play dirty tricks on their younger brother. I guess in today's parlance, you could say Ash was kind of a nerd, where his brothers were rude. Ash was kind and thoughtful, where they were rowdy. Ash was quiet. And where they were hasty, Ash was patient and persistent. And where his brothers were brawny, Ash was, well, underdeveloped. So, at one point, since they loved anything difficult, dangerous, risky, those two older brothers signed on to a whaling expedition. And everyone believed that Ash would relish staying at home without his older brother's oppression. But he surprised everyone, and he signed on to the very same ship as a cabin boy. Now that's the low man on the totem pole, let me tell you. And any job that was too difficult, too dirty, too tedious for anyone else to do, that was the job that Ash got. He thought, what the heck, this is just like home. And there were plenty of slaps and kicks to make him feel not ignored, but, like part of the family. And there was never a moment for boredom. And he had no time to think about his greatest fear, which was sailing over the ocean. Well, after weeks and weeks of sailing, they finally reached their destination, Deception Island, way down at the southern end of South America. Now, this rocky little nub just didn't have a lot to recommend it. There was a well for fresh water, a couple of ramshackle buildings with broken equipment, and that was about it. But But there was another feature. There was a huge bird colony on the other side of the island. And occasionally a sailor would go over the ridge that separated the whaling camp from the bird colony, and he would steal bird eggs. It was a nice variation for their diet. Salt pork, salt cod, sauerkraut, and saltines. Well, one day, Ash's older brothers, and their names were Per and Gunnar. Per and Gunnar decided to go over and steal some eggs and maybe get a couple birds to roast. So off they went, but they didn't come back. There was kind of a half-hearted search mounted, but then all the whaling boats came in and it was time to get to work processing all the carcasses. Officially, they said that Per and Gunnar had slipped and fallen to their deaths. But in his heart, Ash knew that his brothers were still alive. Determined to find them, he filled his knapsack with cheese and bread and a bottle of water, and he climbed the ridge between the whaling camp and the bird colonies. When he got over there, he took a moment to accustom himself to the overwhelming stench of ammonia and fish. That's what a bird colony smells like. While he was standing there, though, something changed. The smell became more sour, more bitter, more sinister than the usual smell of dead whale and unwashed sailor. So he turned to see what it was, and that's when he saw it, and his heart sank to his knees. Of course, it was a troll. Now, Ash had never seen a troll. Even in Norway, they were getting to be quite rare. It was the early days of the 20th century, and trolls were thin on the ground. But to see one here at the opposite end of the earth was really quite a shock. It was well over 6 feet tall. It had a huge mane of bushy hair that overhung 2 piggy little eyes. It had a bulbous red nose that hung down over rubbery red lips that poked out of a massive beard that swept low over a prominent belly. Oh, the rest of it was covered with wiry black hair. "You must be one of those whaler men," the troll boomed at him. "Why are you here? To test me? To rob me? To fight me? Like those other 2 buffoons?" Oh, said Ash. You know my brothers? You met them? Are they here? You have to tell me where they are. I need to find them." "Why do you want those men? They're terrible. They will rattle your noggin. They will cheat you and rob you and fight you." "Oh, well, yeah, they do that. But really, they're my brothers. And I don't want anyone else deciding when I am done with them. So, please, can I see them now?" "You are full of demands for such a puny specimen." But the troll snapped a nod over at a large crack in the cliff behind him. Ash went in, and sure enough, it was a big cave. And by the flickering light of a fire in a hearth, he could see his two brothers at the bars of a large metal cage. Per, the older brother, elbowed Gunnar in the ribs and said, "Look who's here! Ha ha! It's useless! Well, I guess we better start to pray because it looks like our luck just ran out." Oh, yeah, those are my brothers. And from his vantage point, Ash could see that the door to the cage wasn't closed all the way. It wasn't latched, it wasn't locked. But, well, he figured his brothers had other things on their minds and hadn't noticed that they could easily leave. Ash went back out to the troll and said, "Yep, those are my brothers, all right. Can I have them? I'll take them off your hands right now." "No," said the troll. "You know how this works. You do 3 things for me. By the end of today, first thing, find what I lost. Second thing, bring me the killer. Third thing, we'll talk about that later. Do it today. If you fail at any of these tasks, I will eat you all." And the troll smiled a ghastly smile. Ash felt a little bit low, so he went apart a ways and sat on a rock. It was time for a snack, definitely. So he opened his knapsack and took out the bread and cheese, and he noticed there was a tiny little mouse sitting in front of him. He said, "Oh, Miss Mouse, would you like to share a bite of cheese with me? And maybe you could tell me, how can I find something if I don't even know what it is?" Well, the mouse enjoyed the little crumb of cheese he gave her, and suddenly she spoke. "Oh, is it something that doesn't quite belong? Is it something that's long and thin and gets in my way? Is it something behind his bed?" Oh, well, with these clues and the mouse's guidance, Ash went back into the cave and he located the troll's bed. He'd really thought it was a trash heap. But with the mouse's guidance, he was able to burrow his way under the bed, over bones and rocks and all kinds of stuff. But he reached way, way back until his hand felt something long and smooth that had spirals going up it. When he brought it out to the light, he could see it was the horn from a narwhal, a small whale that only lives in the Arctic Ocean. So Ash knew that this must be a souvenir of Norway, and the troll certainly snatched it out of his hands. "Well, that looks like job number 1 all done," said Ash. "No, you do 2 more things. Bring me the killer." Oh, now Ash was really worried. Killer? What killer? Am I the killer? I swatted a fly the other day. Would I do? And then he looked down at his friend the mouse. and said, I might not be here tomorrow. So and thanks for all that you've done to help me. I want to leave you what's left of my cheese. So he broke off a chunk and gave it to her. I'll leave it somewhere you can get it easily. But really, how am I going to find a killer?
Oh, said the mouse. Is it black and white? Does it need lots of room to swim? Does it hate getting tumbled on the rocks? Maybe the sea mouse knows.
So the mouse groomed the last of the cheese off her whiskers, and in a flash she was gone. Now Ash was really depressed. He stared into his knapsack, thinking maybe the answer would be there, but the only thing that came up was, would the troll kill him before it ate him? Not a comforting thought. But then the mouse was back and full of information, and with that information, Ash went to the troll, and they went to a ledge overlooking this little bay where the cliffs dove deep, deep, deep into the water. And up into this little bay swam a ginormous black and white killer whale. Well, the troll and the whale had a lot to say to each other, and so it was late afternoon when Ash followed the troll back to its cave. Well, I guess I did job number 2. Can I have my brothers now? The troll muttered into its beard, "They never got to 3 before. But then its stomach rumbled, and it had the idea, "Eating contest! I will out-eat you before I eat you." And sure enough, he scooped out 2 bowls from the black kettle that was bubbling beside the fire. It was really dreadful stuff. Ash wondered if it was even fit for humankind to eat, because apparently trolls don't pluck the birds before they throw them in the pot. They don't skin the seals. They don't gut the fish. But Ash had an idea. "Hey, I'm going to get a little more wood for the fire, and I'll be right with you." And when he knelt down, he moved his knapsack around to the front with the flap open. And he took out the cheese like he said he would, and he put it behind the wood pile. And then he stood up and threw the wood onto the fire and went to the table. There he matched the troll bite for bite, bowl for bowl of that dreadful sludge. But every bite he made sure to dribble or spill into his backpack. And after a long time of this eating contest, the troll put down its spoon and said, "I can eat no more." "Oh, that's too bad," said Ash. "You should do like I do and cut a hole in your stomach. Then I can eat whatever I like and I never get too full." And Ash took out his knife and he stuck it in the knapsack and slit it from top to bottom, and all that dreadful sludge fell down on the floor. The troll looked shocked. But then he considered and he thought, "Well, doesn't that hurt?" Oh, hardly at all. And in fact, the more often I do it, the easier it gets. So the troll swept his beard to the side and pulled out his knife and plunged it into his belly with predictable results. And that is how Ash's brothers learned to value him a little bit more. Thank you. Thank you. Now, if you can believe, there was another person there. And I searched and searched, and I was able to find John Wylder, who is now here with us to tell you a story. Please welcome John Wylder.
I'm not sure how I got out of the cave, but here I am. My father always talked wistfully about the idea of a hearth fire, and he would think about the concept of gathering the family around food, around a warm fire, telling stories and all that charm. But the reality was, we lived in a standard old cookie-cutter house. It had a living room, it had a dining room, it had bathrooms, but nary a hearth to be found. And on holidays, we'd gather the family, and people would come up out of the rooms where they found a place to sleep, and they would wander into the kitchen to see what the plan for the day was. And the kitchen became our figurative hearth. And on those days, my mother would step back and let my father take over cooking duties in the morning. And he would make pancakes with real butter and Vermont maple syrup. And he had this big old aluminum griddle that only he used. And he knew it was ready by the way water would dance on the top of it when he would drop it when he thought it was getting close. And when the meal was done, everybody would wander out of the kitchen. And in those days, we usually had a white Christmas, and we were all stuck indoors. And so the men would go to a back room for the annual chess tournament. No women allowed. And the ladies would gather in the kitchen for gossip and storytelling. And throughout the day, other guests would arrive at the front door laden with gifts and even more food. And there'd be these hugs and tousle-haired greetings at the door. And then the children would be sent to the basement to play. I later described that as we were for display purposes only. And the whole thing would build up as everybody took turns cooking things. And I would sneak out of the basement into the kitchen and study the cooking and smell the food. And so all my memories of a holiday were about food and stories and people gathering in the kitchen. When my wife and I were dating, she told me her Christmas stories. And she grew up on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia and never had a white Christmas. Instead, she would talk about walking barefoot on the beach under sunlit blue skies. Quite a difference. And when we got married, we initially did that thing newlywed couples do, holiday with one family, other holiday with the other family, and next year, swap them around. The net result is you're never home for the holidays. You're always on the road. We were living in Atlanta at the time, and after a while, everybody said, look, Atlanta's centrally located. Why don't we use your house for Thanksgiving? Well, okay, it sounded like fun. And so we ended up hosting these huge Thanksgivings in our house. And again, it's all about the kitchen because we had to cook for, the biggest one was for like 25 people. And some of them were our friends who called themselves holiday orphans because they didn't have any family close by to go, and they were welcomed into our kitchen-like hearth to join in this celebration. And this was a wonderful time. And then Christmas was usually spent with my wife's sister who lived a couple hours south of Atlanta. And Christmas morning, we'd get up in the car and load up the presents and leave our beautifully decorated home behind to spend Christmas with the family. And we'd get there and there were all these kids running around and there was all this noise and action and mountains of presents, but no hearth. And one more time, find everything and everyone in the kitchen. And throughout the day, you'd go in the kitchen and cook your specialty, and you'd tell a story about your contribution to the meal. And when the big turkey was done, my brother-in-law would pull it out of the oven and put it aside to rest. And then we'd all sneak in when he wasn't looking and cut pieces of the turkey while the rest of the meal was being finished. And when everything was ready, we would gather round the turkey and hold hands and say the blessing. It wasn't ever done in front of a hearth. And then in 2003, everything changed. Due to jobs and some other things, my wife and I left Atlanta and moved west and settled here in Portland, Oregon. And it happened very suddenly in the fall. We barely had time to say goodbye to everybody. And we looked at houses and decided for the first time in our life, we wanted a home with a view. Jekyll Island, where my wife grew up, was 12 feet above sea level. Her parents lived a couple blocks from the ocean, not a view. And Atlanta sits on the Piedmont Plateau, 1,000 feet above sea level, but it's all rolling hills. And our houses were always nestled in these wooded suburbs, surrounded by tall pine trees, never a viewed. And so in Portland, we found this house on the slope of Mount Sylvania, an extinct 10,000-year-old volcano cinder cone. And if you walk around our block, on one side you get to see Mount St. Helens, and on the other side there's Mount Hood. And if you come into our home, we've got this huge, tall living room with double height windows. And through the window, you can see the valleys below all the way out to the coastal range. And we were working through our holiday plans, and Thanksgiving was on us, and we invited people, but we were sure nobody would come. And at the last minute, we were saved by an old friend of mine who already lived in Portland, and we became the holiday orphans that year. But we decided we're going to keep Christmas on the road. It's our tradition. But we had to get all the gifts out early to meet the mailing dates. And we had to get cards out. And I'd followed my mother's tradition of falling in love with Christmas cards. And this time, for the very first time, we wrote a Christmas letter. And in the letter, we gave people door-to-door directions from our home in Atlanta to our home in Portland, whether they took plane, train, or automobile. We gave them a detailed plan on how to come visit us. And as we're going through all that, the one thing we didn't do was check the weather report. And the first time we checked, it said, a dusting of snow on the valley floor with accumulations above 500 feet. How do you know? And number two, how high up on this mountain are we? 850 feet was the answer. Well, we had this, what seemed like a great plan because we, short on time, we were going to fly out Christmas Eve, get to Atlanta in time for the festivities, and turn around and come right back. And so we made sure to eat up all the fresh food because we didn't want anything to spoil. And we're planning that last meal, and the snow starts coming down, and it's coming down harder. And we thought, we got a plan. We're going to get in the car, we're going to drive to the airport, we're going to spend the night at an airport hotel so we can get off the mountain. And right then the airline said, your flight has been canceled. And oh, by the way, how does December 28th sound for your Christmas trip? Well, no thank you. And so we looked out the window as we realized food was going to be a problem, and the road was already completely covered. And so I did the check the pantry thing, and it was just as bad as I expected. Pork and beans, black beans, red beans, cans of soup. And then I went into the refrigerator and pulled out the freezer tray. And there were these white frost-filled bags of indeterminate origin with no date on them. That didn't look real good. And we one more time looked out in the street like maybe we can drive to a grocery, and it was just gave up. So we went to bed, and just as we were going to turn off the light, my wife said to me, and just what are you going to cook for Christmas dinner tomorrow? And you'll find out right after we get back from intermission. Thank you, everyone. 15-minute intermission. Please grab something to drink, bathrooms upstairs, and have a great time.
Hello. I don't know about you, but I've been so worried about that pantry that only has beans. But before we get to what John cooks for his wife on Christmas, I have a few announcements. I know it's way, way, way too early, but I want you to start thinking about New Year's resolutions. Let's hear a collective groan about that. Oh, now, I'm going to make you happy because if you talk to Brian, he has a wonderful New Year's resolution for you. Write a poem a day. Let's hear a cheer for that. Yay! It is called the Stafford Challenge. Join a community of poets committed to writing a poem a day for a year, starting January 17th, 2024. Please see Brian if you want to, yes, this way, right here, if you want to find out more about that. And you can find out more at staffordchallenge.com. Bridget. Yes, you may, George.
Such a wonderful poet. And I was with him one time and someone asked him, but what if you don't like what you're writing? And he said, lower your standards.
Well, thank you, George. We appreciate that. I'm ribbing him. That was Ken Iverson, president of Portland Storytellers Guild, which is the perfect segue into Portland Storytellers Guild. That is why we're here tonight. They are our hosts, our sponsors, a wonderful, wonderful community of people. We've got some Zoom programs that are coming up in the next couple of months here. I want to mention that just a week from today, we have a Zoom stories with Ken Iverson, called The Mouse at the Manger. You have the flyers there, Stories for Christmas. That will be Zoom next week at 5 o'clock. Our next performance with several people will also be on Zoom on January 13th. All of this information is at our website, portlandstorytellers.org. We have another Zoom show, which will be a one-person show, on Saturday, January 20th. That is with Eric Foxman. Eric, there you are. I'm so looking forward to Eric's stories. Teens, imagine what they can do. Now, it's not what they can do to you. Just imagine what they can do. And I also want to talk about our story swaps. I actually got my introduction to Portland Storytellers Guild way back in 2012. I was developing a 1-hour story show, and I wanted to try out the first 7 minutes. I went to this story swap. I brought my deviled eggs because it is a potluck. I found a wonderful, warm, welcoming community, www, right there. So great. I got wonderful feedback, and here I am, do the math, however many years later. We have our story swaps on the second Friday of every month. They are just around the corner here. I've got the address, St. Philip Neary Church at 2408 Southeast 16th. Doors open at 6:15. Swap runs from 6:30 to 8 o'clock. Plenty of parking. And I want you to think about coming, because you don't have to tell a story if you don't want to. You can just sit and listen to stories. Because what more wonder can you get when you say to somebody, tell me a story? And that's why we're here tonight. Tell me a story. And you can learn such wonderful skills in telling those stories. So a great round of applause for Portland Storytellers Guild. Yes. And now I have a hat over here. I've got a drawing to make, so let's do that. Person who will get free tickets to our February show is Dawn A. There you go. Dawn A, yes. Excellent, very good. I will give this. Do you want to come up, tell us a story? Well, we will get information to you. Thank you so much for coming tonight. I see that Trish is the teller that brought you here. Blessings to Trish. Blessings to all. I haven't even gotten into the hot toddies yet. Do you want to hear what?
Let me tell stories about Trish.
We'll pay for that. Well, it is now time to find out what on earth is John going to make for Christmas dinner. Please welcome back John Wylder.
That next morning, we woke up to that odd glowing light you get when there's an overcast after a big snowfall. It's not it's kind of twilight. And there was that silence that a big blanket of snow gives you where there's just no sound. And we got out of bed, and I went and found a yardstick to do the ceremonial plunge into the snow to see just how deep it was. And it was almost 1.5 feet of snow on the ground already, and it's still coming down. And out of sheer desperation, we called the grocery store that's at the bottom of our hill with no real hope. And this person answered, "Merry Christmas." It's like, "You're open?" "Oh, we couldn't go home. The snow came on so quickly, we were trapped in the store. So we decided to make the best of it, and we're going to stay open all day. Come on down." And so we broke out these new winter clothes we bought to replace our shorts and t-shirts from Atlanta. And we found winter boots, and we got trekking poles, and we got backpacks, and we pulled on knit caps, and we set out the door, trying not to slide down the driveway butt first into the street. And we finally made it down into the street, and there are no tracks. There's no tire tracks. There's no people tracks. There's not even animal tracks in this beautiful, pristine blanket of snow. And we set off down the hill, and the only sounds you could hear were the crunch of our feet in the snow and the occasional groan of an overladen branch full of snow. We went down one turn and down another turn, and finally there's some animal tracks in the snow, the only sign of life. And we make the final turn into the parking lot of the grocery store, and it was like a holiday movie. There's no cars, but there's ski tracks, snowshoe tracks, sled runner tracks, footprints, all leading into the shopping center. And when you got close, the pizza joint had a big hand-lettered sign in the window inviting everyone to use the game room as daycare for their children while they went and shopped in the grocery store. And we got in the grocery store, and it was festive. The workers had Santa hats and reindeer hats on and were actually smiling. And as he walked through the aisles, everybody was saying hello, and they're pointing out these delicacies. "Have you ever tried this for Christmas? Oh, my grandmother always used this. Try this." And it reminded us of those European Christmas markets we'd been to, because it was just festive and friendly and just people all helping each other. So we decided we would do a traditional Christmas dinner. We were going to get a roast and potatoes, and we figured we better get a lot more food for a couple more days. And then we remembered we got to carry it all back up the hill through the snow. And so we took a few things out, put a few things in, and then we got to the dessert aisle, and we got into the fight we always get into. Pecan pie, apple pie. Bought both. And we paid for our loot, and we zipped up our jackets and tugged on the overladen backpacks and set back out with our trekking poles going through the snow. And it was a slow climb up the hill, and we would stop to catch our breath and rest. And still no sounds, no car sounds, no plane sounds. And then all of a sudden, whoop! As a big clump of snow fell from a branch onto a roof right next to the roadside. And we made it up the hill and made the final turn up to our house. And we looked back at our footprints in the snow, the only ones there, and home never felt so good. And we got inside and took off all our wet clothes and made some hot chocolate and heated up the sweet rolls we had bought. And we sat there and put on some Christmas music and decided to do the traditional thing we did at our sister's house, which was hot chocolate with the presents. So we got some more hot chocolate. We put the fire on in the hearth, and we went down and opened the stocking gifts, and we did it one by one. Oh, look at this, and oh, look at that, and thank you so much. And then we attacked the big presents one at a time, and peeling the wrapping back and laughing at what the present was. Some were unidentifiable, those that came from my sister. And we finally got to the bottom of the pile, and we called our families and told them how much we missed them and how it's kind of lonely up here on the mountain, and wished them all a Merry Christmas. And with that, we cleared off that, and I started on the big dinner. And got the roast ready, put it in the oven, and my wife decorated the table for two. And she broke out our wedding china and our wedding silver and our crystal glasses. And when the roast was ready, I got a bottle of our best wine, and the cat sat at the end of the table waiting for his share. It was a small but lovely group for dinner that night. And after we cleaned everything away, including the pies, we refilled our wine glasses and headed back down into the living room next to the beautiful, huge tree we had bought to fill that big room. And it was decorated with all these handmade ornaments my wife had stitched, a real tribute to her talent and creativity. And the fire was burning, and we looked down, and there were all these Christmas cards. We had forgotten about them. They had come in, and in the rush to get out of the house, we just stacked them up on the table. And so one by one, we opened the cards, and we pointed out highlights. Look at this card. It came from Doug. And oh, wow, Patty in the letter talked about her daughter. And the fire started to sparkle a little bit, and there were shadows on the wall. And the shadows seemed to come alive. They were like ghosts of Christmas past. And there was Doug, and there was Nancy as we read their letters, and they came alive. Our little hearth brought all this magic to us. And suddenly, we didn't feel alone. And in the background, in the music, you could hear, and if you want to be happy in a million ways, for the holidays you can't beat home, sweet home. Happy holidays, everyone. Thank you. Oh, wait, I forgot one thing. When we got in the grocery store, nestled in the greenery by the coffee pot, there was a storyteller. And he was sitting there pounding out a beat and telling these wonderful little stories. And as luck would have it, he's agreed to perform with us here tonight. So please welcome Brian Rohr.
Hearth fire. You know, it was an interesting thing when we were talking about what we were going to do tonight, planning everything, you know, for you all. We were like, wouldn't it be really special if we just started a fire right here? And we're like, oh, that's a brilliant idea. And of course we were going to do that. And then we came and you know, we told Christopher, like, well, where could we set up the fire? And he's like, are you crazy? Something about a fire code or something like that. I don't know. We weren't allowed to start a fire in here. So I'm going to have you use your imaginations. I want everyone right here to just imagine a big, beautiful fire. And around that fire, we're going to hear a story. All right? So on the count of 3, I just want you to all say fire. And it's going to come. Ready? On the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Fire! Do you see it? Do you see it? It's right there. It's right there. And with that fire going, we could start to feel the warmth against our skin. Smell that sweet smoke smell. Hear the crackling of the wood burning. Maybe some sparks shoot out every so often. Are you ready for a story? Yeah. Really? Oh, come on. Come on, convince me. Are you ready for a story? Well, it was once upon a time, it was once upon a time. It was once a long, long, long time ago. A long time ago. When there was a farmer and his wife, and they were very well-to-do. They were very well-to-do. They had land. Their crops were doing well. Their animals were doing well. They had many people working for them. Life was good. Except for one thing. One thing. They couldn't have a child. They tried and they tried, and the years went by. And it brought them grief, and it brought them heartache. Well, one day, which wasn't uncommon, after the hard work of the day, the husband went to town, went to the bar, to the pub, had some drinks with some of the other people in the town. And they started getting a little drunk and poking a little fun. Oh, you don't have a child. Where's your child? It was a cruel thing to do, but they thought they were having a good time. But it affected his heart. And as he was walking home, kind of stumbling home, oh, he felt that grief, he felt that pain, and he dropped to his knees and looked up on that clear day, or night, I should say, on that clear night sky. And he saw a star, that first star. And he made a wish. Now, you got to be careful what you wish for, right? And you got to be careful how you phrase your wishes, especially if you're in an old story. I don't know if he knew he was in an old story, but he wasn't too careful with his wish, because he said, "Oh, I wish I had a child, even if he was a hedgehog." Well, as luck would have it, soon after that, his wife became pregnant. She was with child, and they were overjoyed. They were overjoyed. This is what they were longing for. And after the requisite amount of time, she gave birth to a little boy. And on the bottom half of this little boy, he had perfect little toes and feet and chubby little legs. A little tushy, a little penis. That cute little boy from the bottom down. But the top up, he was half a hedgehog. And they were like, "What is going on?" And she said, "Oh, it was your wish." Well, there is no other name for him except Hans my Hedgehog. Hans, my hedgehog. And here was the thing, Hans could not sleep in a regular bed. He had all these quills coming off of him. And he couldn't sleep with his mother because she would get poked. And so they made a little bed of straw behind the stove, behind their hearth. And that's where he slept, behind the stove. For days and weeks and months and years. That's where he would lie, that's where he would stay. Well, many years had passed, 8 years, 9 years, 10 years. And one day, a fair had come to town, and the husband was going to the fair and asked his wife, what would you like me to bring home? And she said, just some meat and some buns and something we can have for dinner. And he asked the maid what she would want, and she said, some shoes and maybe some hand-sewn stockings. That would be lovely. Thank you so much. And he started walking out the door, and he's like, oh yeah. Ah, Hans, what do you want? Father, all I want you to bring me is a pair of bagpipes. Bring me some bagpipes. Fine, I'll bring you bagpipes. You have to understand, he was not happy to have a son that was half a hedgehog. And after, 8, 9, 10 years, he just wanted him gone. He was tired of him. He wanted him gone. So that's why he was grumpy. He was like, fine, I'll bring you back some bagpipes. And he went to the fair, and he came back with the things. He brought back some food for dinner, some shoes and stockings for the maid. And he did bring some bagpipes for Hans, my hedgehog. Well, it wasn't too long after that Hans said, Father, here's what I want you to do. I want you to take the rooster, go to the blacksmith and get shoes put on him. All right? I want you to do that for me. And if you do that, I will ride away and you will never have to see me again. Well, it sounded like a good bargain to the farmer. So he took the rooster. The blacksmith thought he was crazy, but he did it. It was good money. He shod that rooster, put the shoes on. The farmer brought it back to Hans, and Hans hopped on that rooster like it was a horse and took his bagpipes and said, oh, Father, let me just take a couple pigs, 2, 3, maybe 4 pigs with me. So you have to remember, they had animals on the farm, right? And the father said, fine, you take them and get out of here. And Hans took those pigs and rode off into the forest. And when he went into the forest, he went deep into the center of that forest. And he found a little opening that had a tree in the center. A large tree. And he flew up on the back of that rooster. They flew up into the branches of the tree. And up there, Hans began to play the bagpipes. And down below, the pigs were dancing around that tree. Well, much time passed with Hans there in the forest tending to the pigs. His stock of pigs grew and grew and grew more and more and more. And there were all these pigs dancing to his music under that tree. And one day, if you can believe it, a king whose kingdom bordered that forest was lost in the woods and was wandering around trying to find his way out. when he heard some music. Beautiful music, stunning music, haunting music. And he followed the sound until he came to that clearing where Hans was up in that tree, and he saw the strangest scene of a rooster with a hedgehog sitting on its back playing the bagpipes, and dancing around the tree were hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pigs. And he yelled out, "Excuse me! I happen to be lost in the woods here. Do you know how I can find my way out?" And Hans flew down off the branch of that tree and landed before the king and said, "Oh, yes. Oh, that is no problem. I know exactly how to help you out. But I'll need something in return. I want you to put down in writing that I will get the first thing that greets you when you get back to your kingdom." Oh, well, all right, we could do something like that. But the king thought to himself, "Oh, this hedgehog can't read. I'm just gonna put whatever I want in this contract. I'm gonna put down, oh, he's not gonna get what he demands, and it's okay, it doesn't really matter." And so he did that and signed the contract. And Hans helped him out of the forest. And when the king arrived to his kingdom, his daughter ran up to him and said, "Father, Father, where have you been? You have been gone for longer than we expected. Where have you been? It is so good to see you, Father." And he explained about being lost in the woods. And he explained about Hans, the hedgehog. And he explained about the bargain that he had made, but he said, "Listen, don't worry about it. I didn't really make that bargain. The hedgehog can't read. I put something different in the contract." And the daughter was like, "Good, because I wouldn't go with someone like that anyway, you know," and everything was okay. Well, some time passed. And Hans was still in the forest, playing and making music up in that tree, when one day, another king in a neighboring kingdom that was also bordering this forest just so happened to get lost in these woods. I know. What is with these kings? They just put tracking devices in them or something. I don't know, but he was lost in the woods. And he heard the beautiful, beautiful music being played. And he allowed his ears to follow that sound. And he came across the strangest scene of a sea of pigs just dancing and dancing and dancing. And there in the center of that sea was a tree, and up in the tree was a hedgehog on a rooster playing the bagpipes. "Excuse me! Excuse me! I kind of need some help here. I'm lost in these woods. Do you know how I could find my way out back to my kingdom?" Hans flew down in front of that king and said, "Oh, yes, no problem. I know exactly how to get you out of this forest. But I want something in exchange." And the king said, "What is it? Name it. I'm sure we could find a way to make it happen." And Hans said, "Oh, I want you to give me the first thing that greets you when you return to your kingdom." And the king said, "Well, gladly I will do that. I appreciate your help. And he put that in words. He put that in the contract. He wrote that down, and they signed it. And Hans helped him out of the woods. And when the king returned to his kingdom, the princess ran up to him and said, "Oh, father, we have missed you. We have missed you. It has been a long time that you have been gone. We were so worried. What happened?" And this king explained about being lost in the woods and explained about this strange hedgehog being who was playing music, who helped guide him out. And he said, "Listen, I made a bargain with him. I made a bargain that the first thing to greet me, first one to greet me, would be his. And you were the first one to greet me." And she said, "Oh, that is hard. But I am so grateful that you are back. And your word is important. Your word is important." Well, back in the woods, Hans had been in the forest, in that tree, for a really long time, many years. His pigs spanned into the thousands. And he was getting a little bored. He had done what he needed to do in the woods. So he and his rooster started making their way back to the village that he had come from. And he sent word to his father saying, "You better get the pigsties ready in the whole town, in the whole village, because I got a lot of pigs coming, and we're going to have a big slaughter." Father was a little bit disappointed to hear this. He thought Hans had died a long time ago. But he did what his son had asked, and he sent word around the whole village, and they made sure they had room. And here comes Hans, leading all of these thousands of pigs into the village. Now, this is a Grimm story, okay? This is a Grimm's fairy tale that I'm telling you, called Hans my Hedgehog. And in the words that were written down, it says that there was a horrific stench from all the slaughtering, and that blood of all those pigs was just flowing all over the town. I don't know if I'm going to tell you that part. I'm not sure if I will. We'll see. I mean, it's an interesting part. I think it's a very important part. It's, some people are offended by those things, strong smells and blood and things like that. I like that in a story, but I'll spare you this time. But after all the slaughtering of pigs was done, Hans said to his father, "Go get my rooster some new shoes at the blacksmith, and then I'll leave again and you'll never see me ever again." And so he did that, and Hans hopped on that rooster with his bagpipes and left that village. And he made his way to the kingdom of the first king. Now, the king had given orders to his people, to his soldiers, to his guards, and said, "If you ever see a strange person that is half hedgehog riding on a rooster playing bagpipes, you are to attack. You are to attack and destroy him. Do you understand?" And so it was when Hans arrived to the kingdom. Sure enough, all of these guards began to attack. But he just kicked that rooster hard, and the rooster flew high in the sky and landed through the palace window right into the royal chambers of the king. And Hans said, "I have come to receive what we agreed upon in my bargain." And the king kind of stuttered and was like, well, I don't. He said, "I have come to receive what we agreed upon. And if you don't give it to me, I am going to kill you and the princess." The king was frightened and pleaded with the princess, "Oh, just go with him. It'll save our lives." And so they went into a carriage. The princess went into a carriage, and Hans, with his bagpipes and the rooster, followed her in. And the carriage began to go a little bit, and the king thought, "Oh, this is the last I'm ever going to see of my daughter." And the princess was kind of cowering off to the side, as far away from Hans as she could be, and Hans kept on inching closer and closer. And he would kind of poke her a little bit with his quills and poke her again and poke her again. And he said, "Oh, you were hoping to deceive me, to deceive me. I have no use for you." And he got out of that carriage and he left. And he hopped on his rooster and he made his way to the second kingdom. And that king had said to the guards, "If ever you see a strange being riding a rooster, playing the bagpipes, the upper half of his body is a hedgehog, you treat him as an honored guest. He saved my life. You invite him in, you give him the royal treatment, and bring him directly to me." And so when Hans arrived, this is what he was greeted with, and he was brought in before the king. And the king said, "Oh, Hans, my friend, thank you so much. And I know we made a bargain. And I will keep my word, and it was my daughter who was the first one to greet me." And the princess was a little scared because he looked so strange. He looked so strange. But she said, "Thank you so much for helping save my father. The whole kingdom is grateful to you. I will marry you. I will marry you." Now, the night before the wedding, Hans spoke to the king and said, "Listen, I want you to do me a favor. I want you to have 4 of your guards to build an enormous fire in my room. And at exactly the stroke of midnight, they are to rush in and grab whatever they see on the ground and to throw it into the fire and to stand there until it is completely burned, and not to leave or do anything else until that is done." The king thought that was a very odd request, but said okay. And that night, Hans went into his room, and just before midnight, with much discomfort, he peeled off his hedgehog skin and threw it on the ground, and in agony crawled into bed. And when the bells chimed at midnight, the 4 guards burst into the room. They grabbed that hedgehog skin and they threw it into the fire. And as it was burning on the bed, Hans was screaming and squealing. And they went to check on him and he said, "No, don't! Stay with the skin, make sure it burns completely." And they did that. And he was screaming and screaming, but they stayed until the skin was completely burned. And then the king and the princess came in hearing all the noise. And they saw that lying in the bed was not half a hedgehog and half a man, but a full man. But from head to toe, he was charcoal black as if he had been burned. And so the king sent for a scrub brush and some goat's milk and some salve. And all night long, the princess scrubbed and scrubbed and scrubbed Hans with that scrub brush until all the black charcoal came off of him. And then, with a delicate fabric, soaked it in that goat's milk and patted his skin until it was soothed. And then they put the healing salve all over his body. And in the morning, he was healed. And he was a beautiful man. And the princess saw him. After the work of all night, bringing him back to health. And they went and they took a walk in the garden. And they spoke. And they got to know each other. And so when it was time for them to actually be wed, she said, "I choose this. I choose this for myself. This is indeed what I want." And so a great wedding was had. A great wedding was had, a wonderful celebration. And they invited all of the great dancers and singers and musicians and storytellers and chefs and poets and artists and firework makers. And it was a glorious time. It was a glorious time. And I got to tell you something. I was very fortunate. I got to go to that wedding. I did get to go to that wedding. Well, I wasn't exactly invited to the wedding. I snuck in through the bathroom window. But, it seemed like such a good party. How could one miss that? But no one seemed to mind. Everyone said, "Well, welcome here. Have some mead. Have something to drink. Come dance with us. Come tell us a story. Come tell us a story." And I did. Oh, and they were so grateful. As I was leaving, I said, "Listen, I gotta go. I have a performance at Artichoke Music that begins in a few hours." And they said, "Oh, well, here, let us give you a gift." And they gave me a gorgeous, beautiful bottle of mead. Their finest mead that they had. And they said, "Here, you take this." And so I was bringing that mead here, and I asked Christopher back there to set up little shot glasses, so I can pour a little bit, so each of you could have a taste of that mead. However, I'd left the bottle in the car, and so I went back out to get the car, and my drum was there as well, and a few other things, and I put the bottle under my arm. And as I was walking in, there was a little cat that ran in front of me and startled me, and all of a sudden, I dropped that bottle and it smashed on the ground. And that mead flowed down and found the grass, a patch of grass and earth, and it flowed into that grass, down into that earth, deep, deep, deep down, back to the earth, where the story first came. At least that's what they say. That is how it happened. And that is all I know. The story of Hans my Hedgehog. Thank you all so much. You are a generous, loving, amazing audience. Thank you so much. I just want to call back Trish and John and Gretchen up here, and we're just going to do a final bow. A final way to say thank you for being a lovely audience. We had a great time with you.
I made the fire.
All right, thank you. And we hope you have a wonderful, wonderful, happy holidays and a good night. Thank you. Hans, my Hedgehog. It was such a fun show.